your perspective of the food industry, but in such an environment, where where does that morality or the setting up of that compliance standards really lie? Is it about being, can you share maybe examples of, on a named or no name basis, where you may have experienced that people have actually done something to create a better product than may have been necessitated one way or the other?
So for any company, when a new product is introduced, there's always a tussle between the legal, the scientific, and the marketing. And usually the marketing wins. So fundamentally, every company toys around with it. And if you've seen ads of malted beverages, which claim that your height will increase, so many inches if you consume for XYZ number of days. There was a case of suicide in Powai where the boy didn't gain height. So, I mean, see, the morality and the genuineness is a company ethics. It's an individual company culture that has to be with the top management, and it has to be driven down. So it's very, very difficult to have a general comment, but basically there has to be some truth in what you say. And the truth has to be objective, and it has to be quantifiable. When you make a subjective statement and use it for marketing, I think you're, by the time the authorities wake up and pull you down, you've already finished your marketing. The product is out there. So these are the games that have to stop. So there has to be some, but by the time the law gets to it, it's too late. So I think it's every culture, every company has its own, ethics, where to draw the line and how much to stretch the truth.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Gupta, you come from one of the most regulated industries in the world, the pharmaceutical sector. You're the General Counsel, an Indian General Counsel of a multinational company, which obviously has some experiences for you. What is it that becomes that defining moment of trying to do something that marries the cultures, the practicality, and implementation within an organization and a business?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, it's true that the drugs and pharmaceutical industry is the most highly regulated industry, but it's almost everywhere. Means wherever the food and the pharmaceutical industry is regulated, and in Indian context also, the laws which I am seeing or the compliances which we have to do are of course a little bit on the higher side, but I can find the same across the other entities, other global players within the group and within the industry. But what is not prevalent, or what is not seen generally or understood by my peers, is how do we comply with those laws? What is the understanding and of our regulators, and how really those laws are implemented? Like I'll not just not to share too many information about this company or the other companies where I have worked. Again, a few multinational companies I have worked with, taking 2 or 3 examples to demonstrate what I really mean here. In one of the case, one of the company was supposed to take a regulator's approval, and before starting the action plan or before implementing the product launch, etc., the Indian company went ahead and without seeking the regulator's approval. After about maybe 2 or 3 years of the launch of the product, it was discovered that this particular regulatory approval was required, and we have failed to obtain that approval. Now, this matter was, of course, came in the process of the global audit. So global peers and global seniors were immediately alerted and and the natural response to me was that, okay, now since Vikas, this non-compliance, this particular business division has happened, what to do? and means I looked through the whole legislations and whole whatever experience at my disposal, and advised them, boss, it's better to keep quiet. Let's not try to be now over compliant by going to the compliance regulator and telling that this is what we have done, because by doing that we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot. So somehow this they couldn't understand. And this is what is the area where our regulator, even though our Indian colleagues and Indian businesses want to be compliant, they do not have at many times rather, they face the dilemma of how to be compliant. If the compliant, this kind of situation comes, what to do? And means in this particular example, my seniors and the highest level were not convinced with my response. They said, okay, let's go to some external consultant and take their advice. So they took the advice. Again, a long drawn advice came, but at the end of the advice it was that, boss, it's better to keep quiet and then to remain, than to further aggravate it. Just to add a further what we call oil to this incident, about 6 months later, one development or an incident was reported into this particular product into the market. And then again the question came, what to do? Because we have not been compliant in the beginning, and now a further non-compliance has been reported, or incident has been reported in this product. What shall we do? Our laws are silent about it. Our regulators cannot. And the final conclusion is just to keep it buried where it is, and let's leave it to Ram and Allah of this word, and let's wait if the regulator wakes up. And if we go to regulator today itself, regulator will ask under which provision you are making the declaration, and if you are non-compliant, you have to face these penalties and prosecution and imprisonment. There is nothing to do. Yeah.
So you strike a very important point, which is about the segue into enforcement. So
Yeah.
what you're really saying is that even if we wanted to do something more than, or we wanted to make a declaration, that may be a challenge and an issue. But I think what I would be curious to ask, if I may, is did your company management, did your team actually think it valuable to maybe transition to correct those things? So you were in a classic case, you knew that something was possibly not right. You had the right view to try and make a disclosure about it. But was that continuous improvement standard, or was the approach that,
No.
wait to hear?
Dipali, when I am talking about this incident, it goes without saying that whatever the future course of action was there, that was set in right. That was absolutely put in place. And globally, we have the highest compliance standard. But these kind of small lapses can happen. Unfortunately, under the Indian regulatory system, the enforcement system, we do not have the provisions, we do not have the laws which really can or provide for these kind of business accidents, which can arise in any situation. Like taking a food, the FSSAI law example here, what Mr. Chorodia just talked about. The other day I happened to go through was needing to go through the FSSAI law. And I asked some people around that I want the complete law on this thing, and they sent me a mail, and the attachment which I got was of about 580 pages with in font size of 8 and single space. So 580 pages, and that law, FSSAI, is applicable to a nook corner halwai and to a milk vendor and everybody. Now, how the regulator is thinking that this book, and by the way, just out of curiosity, I just typed there samosa, and there is a regulation on samosa also what we eat. But how many samosa vendors know that there is a regulator by the name of SSI and I need to do refrigeration at this level and not to store this thing? So Dipali, by the way, I'm not suggesting or not saying that there should not be willingness or ethics in the company, compliance ethic or compliance culture. All that has to be done. But all that can be achieved well only if the regulations are also structured that way. It should, now 500 pages, if tomorrow the inspector wants to take action against that vendor, I can 100% sure that he will be behind bars because he says there is a law and law says ignorance is not bliss.
So I'm going to be a little controversial.
Yeah.
And invite
That's
maybe a 1 minute quick response from each of you. Are our laws and our enforcement, lack thereof, or applicability, understanding, bureaucracy, really actually advocating a culture of chalta hai?
Chalta hai. That's right.
Okay, I'll make it short. As we all know, for some time now we have prided ourselves in our jugaad and getting things done and getting adjusted and moving on. But I think that is a drag on our enforceability. We have some good laws. They are many times archaic. They're not applicable, and also they're not enforced well. I think if you can enforce laws better and have more clarity, as you said, in the manner in which these need to be enforced, and then you bring to book those who are not compliant, that is how you will get greater level of compliance going forward.
I think sometimes when a law is introduced in India, people first search for the gaps. I think the time is over, and I think they should employ a team to read the law itself.
As far as food is concerned, actually, consumer is driving for this, compliances, not maybe law, but now we are competing with, globally with maybe multinationals and local big brands, and they are improving the quality, and that's happening in food.
No, that's. I agree with you that it is up to the consumer and up to the businessman to make sure that the laws are understood by him and compliant. But the regulator also needs to keep in mind the education level, the cultural, the ethics, the ethos, and the income level of the people for whom the laws are being made. And the regulator, instead of being just a regulator that I don't care about how you implement the law, it is the law. They should keep in mind the implementability of the law as well.
I feel also when company exports goods around the world, it is all of the goods are complying very, very well. So I would say that India culturally does know how to do business by compliance too. So somewhere down the line, if the same culture came in for local goods, I think it would be great.
That's a great point. So yeah, I think I'll now just open this floor to anybody to ask any questions, comments, share any experiences about whether, at least I'm always curious and more interested in knowing what we can do to change and shape that culture and what are the success points. So are there any questions for the panel? Comments, please? Can someone just give the gentleman a mic, please?
Well, I'm from the government side. I used to be rather, 35 years I've spent in the service. There's no doubt the points that have been made by the panelists are very relevant. Can I be heard? My voice is loud enough.
Yeah, maybe we can give you one of these.
So yeah, the points that are made are very, very, very good and very relevant. But let's say, for example, as a police officer, ethically and honest and with high integrity. The question always was the question of numbers. One of the biggest problems that this country faces is the problem of numbers when it comes to enforcement of any law, for that matter. I mean, I must quote here, if you can permit me, that right in the very beginning of my service as an additional SP in Gwalior, there was a collector who came who was also known to be very upright and very, very, very direct and very ethical, and he wanted the traffic laws to be obeyed. So we met, we were meeting somewhere in the evening at a DIG's place, and he said, no, Ramesh, we must get these guys to comply with the traffic laws. You know what our traffic laws are, and if you've been to Gwalior, you would know better. So I don't know what made me say, but I told him, I said, sir, you know, laws can be effective if it is broken by minority of the people. If the majority of the people break laws, there cannot be enforcement. And particularly in a country like ours, because we are a population of 1.2 billion, and we talk about medicines, we talk about food, you know, we are talking about virtually the entire population. So therefore, to just, I have no quarrels or no arguments with what has been pointed out here. I think we should stop looking at the regulators, and that is the conclusion I came to in my life, even in corruption when I was DG EOW, that ultimately how many cases can CBI do? Every year there is a pendency of 30%. How many human resources are you going to put in? And those human resources are going to cost the taxpayers. So the charity begins at home. And therefore, being ethical and compliant has to be self-driven. It has to come from within. And I suppose that is why Mr. Tuljapurkar has very thoughtfully, or the entire Legacies team has very thoughtfully brought about this subject of compliance by choice. That's the point I want to make.
Thank you. Please.
Well, my name is Subhash Chaudhary. I had the fortune of working in very good ethical companies like Colgate and Tata's, so I can share their experience. One of the example is when I was setting up this soap facility in Aurangabad way back in, I think, the 90s. You know, we were setting up the ETP plant, and basically, so the norms which came from Piscataway, the US, were very, very stringent. In fact, India couldn't think of those. So I was telling my American bosses, don't you think this is way above the Indian standards? He said, we care 2 hoods, it has to be as per US standards. And when I brought the factory inspector, when I brought those government agencies to see, they said, why are you wasting so much money? You don't need to maintain that standard. I said, no, that's our Colgate standard. So I agree with Mr. Chopra that it has to be top driven, and it has to come from the top. Second example, we talk of regulation and acts. Let's take the case of Tata's. Before the Factories Act, before the various labor legislations were passed in India, Tata's implemented those concepts of working hours, welfare. Now, Jamshedji Tata did not wait for the British government to start the Factories Act or start the Indian Standing Orders Act and all. So basically, I think absolutely right. It has to be driven from the top, and people has to own. Similarly, as he rightly said, that law is there, it's like a template, but implementation has to come from the heart. So an organization culturally has to believe that yes, we need to be compliant, come what may be, not cut corners and costs, as he rightly said. And we do not basically compromise on costs. Like you go around in Indian factories. I worked in factories where there was no compromise on safety. You could not enter the factory unless you wear a helmet or you wear a safety belt. But there is factories in India where I have worked in a company where the workers don't wear helmet, they don't have earplugs. Still it's going on. When I told them, no, no, chalta hai. So what I mean is there is spectrum in this country also, but ultimately it depends on the management. We as top management, I think we have to do it ourselves. Like I have seen senior managers when they go on the shop floor, they don't wear. Now how do you expect the worker to wear a helmet or a earplug when the manager or the supervisor doesn't wear? So basically, I think culturally, we have to drive this point home, and it has to come from within. So any amount of regulation, any amount of compliance, unless it comes from within the organization, and I think the management of the company and professionals of the company have to, as you rightly said, you have to train people and basically align them mentally that yes, and it has to come from within, whether it's a small worker or a safety worker. I worked in Kuwait in 80s with Sumitomo, with Japanese companies in KNPC. I was shocked that even an outsider, when he comes to the project site, unless he wears the safety apparel, he's not allowed to go. Even the, the cameras were monitoring the speed of the vehicles coming into a project site, just a desalination plant, way back. So I'm sure if Japanese could do, we can also do it. But again, it has to come from inside. Thank you very much.
I am Radhakrishnan from TTK Prestige. I would like to share my experience on compliance. We go by this theme of today, that is compliance by choice. While there are difficulties in terms of understanding the law, or the specifications are not very clearly defined in some of the laws, I think by and large we can achieve a compliance if we are able to get a buyout across functions. While it's important that compliance should be driven from the top, what really is required is a clarity in the mind of people across the organization that whatever work they have been assigned, they can do in a legally compliant way. There is generally a fear that, okay, you have to follow law, that means the work will get stopped. There will be problems. But if the legal department, like what we do here, we go across to the functions, explain to them in simple terms as to what really the law requires you to do. And once the organizational people see that, yes, it is possible to do that, generally the compliance comes through automatically. The second issue that came to my mind was, like one of the panelists was telling, that there was a problem and they were unable to tell the government because there is no provision in law to go and say that you have made a mistake and then you have got all attendant problems. A typical case comes, for example, in a law which I have dealt with extensively, namely the Central Access Act. The common thing which the department would like to do is, they would like to invoke the charge of suppression and go back to 5 years of details and then try to see how much of duty can be demanded from the SSC. What we normally do is, we normally officially correspond with the department that these are the things which we are doing. There is no provision in law which says that you should communicate to the department. But we do. Like wherever there are certain new business process we do, or a new product we are going to do, or new marketing strategies which has got certain implications on tax comes, we write a detailed note that this is precisely what we are going to do. Now, there are two things happen on this. One is, we are clear because we have documented it. Second thing is, we are told the department, this is what you are going to do. And it so happens that in the department itself, you will have different views available on what is the right position in law. But having communicated to the department having no objection to that, tomorrow you are free from the charge of suppression, clandestine removal of goods. You avoid all kind of penalties. You can hold your head high. There are so many court decisions available. The SSC has acted in a very bona fide manner. Therefore, you could mitigate all these punishments and can walk with your head high, saying that, yes, I told you, this is my understanding of law, and this is what I am doing. And the whole situation looks quite good. You don't get into all these problems. And as I said, the main thing is compliance by choice. We could tell we have got so many problems, but the fact of the matter is we are required to comply with the law. So I think we should focus more on trying to internalize the requirements of the law and encourage people to say, yes, you can do what you want. Only thing is, there is a procedure for that. Document the procedure, becomes simple, compliance becomes automatic. By and large, we are become a compliant organization. We are comfortable with the laws that is applicable in the country.
Thank you. Gentleman behind you.
I am Majumdar from TabCab, which is the radio taxi in Mumbai, the latest edition in Mumbai. We are operating in this city for last 4 years, and the compliance is one of the major issues with us because we handle both BMC and the transport department and RTOs. While going through the samosa laws, it's almost like something which comes to our heart. Impossible laws with impossible implementation has not been weeded out, not been rationalized for a long time. Impossible law has a deep vested interest in corruption. It leads to corruption. Point is that someone somewhere has to rationalize these laws. It's extremely important because down the line, the enforcement authority has a lot of interest in non-compliance. I give you one example. How many of us really know that in our office, if there is not a signboard of the name of the office in Marathi, the BMC inspector can issue a notice followed by a non-bailable warrant on the name of the managing director of the company, and it applies to all big and small companies. Problem is there. Problem is that we have law which meant they were designed, nobody thought about implementing it. The set of the people who are supposed to implement that have found a wonderful way, and the unfortunate guy who wants to do business legally and faithfully tosses between the two and finally takes the wrong way and suffers. I would request the panel to deliberate on that. This is a direct linkage with corruption and the reduction of corruption. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just a quick revert on that. Do you think it's the law which is not doable, or do you think it's our attitude to comply to the law which we need to deal with? Because I've studied the food safety law which he says, and I've been on their panel for 3 years in Delhi. I don't think the law is, the law makes sense. It's just that we've never been pushed to do it at all before, and now suddenly there's something to deal with. So this is a very fundamental question, whether it's the law which is wrong or whether it is the compliance that we need to do now that we are dealing with.
Well, I can bring a perspective, having grown up, lived here, there, everywhere, and very much an Indian at heart. That samosa example is pretty unique. If you compare, all of you have traveled very widely and you've been to very many places. Wherever you go in a more evolved, developed society where laws are enforceable, especially food and drug laws, what happens is you can't go and eat in a place unless it is certified. It has a certain standard of safety, cleanliness, and hygiene. Every restaurant in those cities is. You cannot sell food on the street. You cannot cook at home and sell it, because if you do, and it is found to be spurious or injurious to health, you will be in trouble. Now, I think you need the will to enforce. You need a will at the political level, and we have huge human potential to harness it in the right direction, rather than we culturally believe that each one is a great entrepreneur and we should be allowed to do whatever we wish, however we wish. So I think it's the enforceability that is in question.
That's a great point. So does entrepreneurship mean self-determination of what is right for me or us or my enterprise?
I think in the interest of time, can we have just one more question from anybody?
Mr. Oberoi.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Nitin Jain. I am from Tata Chemicals, legal counsel. My question, first of all, I would like to really thank the panel to bring out most of the pain points which the industry is going through. Secondly, as far as the laws which you have mentioned of 580 pages, etc., I would like to add on that is not only the critical aspect, the most additional critical aspect is when regulators themselves are not very clear as to what the laws should be, and by the time they draft the laws, challenges which we are facing is the circulars and the notifications which left, right, center they issue. And they themselves, when they are not very in an ambiguous situation, they issue the circular, they don't know about what is to be done, and they leave it for us to read in the manner which we want to. So something to be done is, which they can't do through regulations, through laws, they bypass and do with circulars, notifications, which are not easily available in the market, which left for industries to interpret in the manner. For a very simple example, I want to give you the entire FSSAI laws. If we see the logo of FSSAI, it has to be in a very prescriptive color combinations. So the entire industry, if you today buy any drink, any products, any FMCG products, you will see that every company is today following their own norms. Somebody is taking a conservative view, somebody is taking a aggressive view, somebody is putting, but it's very expensive to put a color combination of the logo which FSSAI must have not even thought. They must have think ऐसा अच्छा लगता है इसलिए ये logo circular में डाल दो. But the consequences are really, really quite serious, and this is one of the smallest example I could share with the panel.
Thanks. I'll just last comment from you and then wind up.
It seems that if we take a poll here, most of us will have a placard saying do away with regulators or down with regulators. Well, we have our own share of angst and pain points which we have faced. But my simple question is looking within, who is responsible for the regulations? First is that most of the regulations are for us. They are not made. That is misconstrued and misutilized for the benefit of the few. But I don't want to get into that. That's a plague which we are all trying to fight. But question I have is that have we ever tried to see that who is responsible for the regulations? If I am responsible, let me at least discharge my responsibility and then point out that yes, this can be improved, not improved, needs some change, the world has changed. I mean, Macaulay did whatever he did in 1872, but that particular law is still applicable. It had some value, and laws change with time, with environment, with people, the demands of the people. So point I'm trying to make here is, without getting deep into it, true, compliance can be painful. It has a cost. But in the environment we are, first let's look, can we do it or not? And if we can't do it, let's see how we can improve upon it, rather than...
So thank you. I think what we really heard is that obviously we may not necessarily be where we want to be in terms of compliance by choice for various reasons, enforceability, non-enforceability, attitudes, cost, effect. But also I think the whole point that I think that seems to emerge unanimously is that number one, it's a question of ownership, of really deciding that you want to be the best. Yes, now coming from the Tata Group, definitely, setting that benchmark, having the vision to understand that you become the benchmark. So in fact, the Tata Steel policies on work was internationally adopted by the ILO. Maternity health. So, having that vision, definitely demonstrable behavior from the top, making some very open choices sometimes of time and expense